good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to travel somewhere quiet, to a place between sleep and history. A time when people feared something most of us never think about, being buried alive. Don't worry, this story isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to slow your breath, quiet your thoughts, and guide you toward rest. You'll hear the soft sound of an imagined fire beside you, gentle and constant, keeping you warm while we drift into the past. Before we begin, tell me, from which country are you listening tonight? And what time is it there? Whether it's late at night or just before dawn, I'm glad you're here. Before we go further, if you enjoy calm stories like this, you can gently tap the like or subscribe button. No rush, you can do it later, maybe after you've fallen asleep. Now, take a deep breath, settle into the quiet. Imagine yourself sitting by a small campfire under a dark, medieval sky. The wind outside is still, the night calm, and the world feels older than time itself. In this silence, stories once whispered in fear begin to awaken. And tonight, we'll explore one of them, the quiet fear beneath the earth. Long ago, in medieval villages surrounded by forests and fields, death was never far from daily life. But life and death were not as clearly separated as we know them now. Sometimes, people weren't sure which side they stood on. Without modern tools, without clear signs, the line between sleep, sickness, and death could be as thin as a single breath. People relied on the senses, the rise and fall of a chest, the color of the skin, the stillness of a hand, and sometimes these signs were uncertain. Someone might fall deeply ill, lose consciousness, and seem lifeless, while their heart still faintly beat inside. Imagine being there in a small candlelit room, wondering if someone was truly gone, or only sleeping very deeply. The fear was quiet, but powerful. It lived in stories whispered at night, when the air felt heavy and still. People spoke of those who had awoken after burial, of voices faint beneath the ground, or coffins disturbed years later with scratch marks inside. Were they real, or only tales to keep the mind awake at night? No one knew for sure, but the stories spread, like smoke curling through a cold night. Take it slow, we're still here, the fire is still burning. Stay calm. As the medieval world watched over its dead, care turned into caution. Families began waiting longer before burial, hoping for signs of movement or warmth. Some placed small mirrors near the mouth to watch for a breath. Others tied ribbons to fingers connected to bells, just in case. The soft chime of a bell meant life, a fragile sound of hope in a world that feared mistakes. Imagine the sound of that tiny bell in the night, the faintest ring, carried through the still air. Someone rushing to listen, someone whispering, "They're alive." It must have been both terrifying and miraculous. Moments like that reminded people of how delicate life truly was, and how quickly it could be misunderstood. In the corner of every village, there were watchers, men or women who stayed beside the body through the night. They sat with oil lamps, keeping the room dim and warm. They watched for hours, sometimes in silence, waiting for certainty. It was not just a duty, but an act of care, to stay awake while others rested, ensuring no soul was taken too soon. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Somewhere, a breeze moves softly through the grass. The old houses of the past fade into quiet memory, and yet the fear remains, the fear of not being truly gone, or not being truly seen, a fear that was both natural and human, not of the earth itself, but of misunderstanding what it means to be alive. We'll rest here for a moment, beside the warmth of the imagined fire. Let the sound of crackling wood calm your mind. Take it slow, you're safe here. We're still in the first part of our story, the beginning of a strange and silent fear that lived in the hearts of medieval people. The night would pass quietly, with the watcher's eyes half closed, the lamp flickering against the wall. Outside, the world slept, yet inside, time seemed to slow. Every soft breath, every faint shift of air felt important. It was a vigil, not just for the dead, but for the living, a moment suspended between both. Sometimes, hours turned into days. Families waited before allowing burial, just to be sure. They believed that patience could protect a soul from being taken before its time, and in a way, it did. It protected them from the unbearable thought of losing someone twice, once to illness and again to fear. Take it slow, we're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The fear of being buried alive was not only about death, it was about uncertainty. People wanted signs, answers, proof that nature had finished its work. In a time without clear knowledge, they filled the silence with care. They looked for movement, warmth, color, anything that told them, yes, this is truly the end. There were no doctors with machines or monitors, only human eyes and instinct. So when a mistake happened, when someone declared gone, later awoke, it became the story of a lifetime. These tales traveled quickly from one village to another, growing with each retelling. They served as warnings, and perhaps as reminders to take nothing for granted. The fear even changed the way people built their coffins. Later generations would add small openings for air, or bells connected to the lid. Though these ideas belonged mostly to later centuries, their roots came from these old fears. A quiet effort to make peace with the unknown, to be certain that rest was truly rest, not a deep and mistaken sleep. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. If you listen closely, you might imagine the sound of a soft wind moving through grass above an ancient graveyard. No voices, no cries, only stillness. The kind of stillness that brings peace, not fear. It reminds us that even the deepest worries of the past often fade into gentle silence with time. For the medieval people, this fear wasn't strange or foolish. It was simply human, born from care, from love, from the desire to protect those they held close. Even without understanding the body's mysteries, they did what they could to keep one another safe. That quiet effort speaks louder than any tale of horror ever could. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The fire beside you glows softly, its warmth spreading through the night. You can rest now. The story will wait. As the people of the past once kept watch through the night, now this calm story keeps watch for you. You are safe, and the world outside can fade away for a while. Let the quiet take over as we close this part of the journey, the quiet fear beneath the earth. Before we return to the firelight, take a slow breath. Tonight, our story moves gently forward, not into fear, but into understanding. When we look at the medieval world, it's not death itself that we find, but the way people tried to recognize it, and how often they were uncertain. The stillness of life and the silence of death sometimes looked the same, and in that space of doubt, they searched for meaning. In those days, homes were simple: wooden beams, straw on the floor, a small window for light. When someone fell ill, they remained among family, surrounded by familiar voices. There were no hospitals like we know today, no white walls or machines to confirm life, just warmth, breath, and faith in observation, a hand on the chest. a whisper close to the ear. Back then, a still body could easily be mistaken for one without life. Sickness could bring deep fainting spells, long moments of silence, or shallow breathing that went unnoticed. Some diseases slowed the pulse so much that even a trained hand could miss it. So when the heart seemed quiet, people often feared the worst, and sometimes they were wrong. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine the scene, a small room lit by oil lamps, shadows dancing on the walls. Someone lies quietly under a blanket, and around them, loved ones whisper. They wait, uncertain if the silence is permanent. The air feels heavy, thick with both hope and dread. There were signs people believed could prove death: the absence of breath on a mirror, the coldness of skin, the stillness of eyelids. But none of these were perfect. Some watched for hours, even days, to be sure. They wanted to honor life, to give every chance for a final awakening. The role of the watchers was gentle and devoted. They stayed by the bedside, not only out of fear, but out of love. They whispered soft words, or simply listened for any sound of return. It was an act of care, quiet, human, and deeply patient. Each moment was a reminder that even in uncertainty, compassion could guide them. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The world outside the firelight is calm. Inside, you can hear only the steady rhythm of the storyteller's voice. It moves slowly, like footsteps, through time. The same way villagers once moved through the quiet of their homes, careful not to disturb the peace. In that age, knowledge came not from books, but from experience. Every family learned by watching. If someone recovered after appearing gone, the story spread through the village, a tale that mixed fear with relief, and each retelling carried the same quiet lesson: that life was fragile, and that stillness could deceive even the most careful eyes. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The medieval world was full of waiting, waiting for signs, waiting for certainty, waiting for dawn. And in those long hours, people found both anxiety and comfort in the same silence. They didn't rush. They observed, they prayed, they hoped. Because in their hearts, they knew how precious each breath truly was. The long hours beside a still body were filled with small gestures. A cloth soaked in water, gently placed on the forehead. A candle moved closer, its flame reflected in tired eyes. Someone would whisper softly, hoping the sound might bring a flicker of life. And sometimes it did. A faint movement, a sigh, the miracle of breath returning. There were moments of quiet confusion too. When a person awoke after being thought gone, fear and joy arrived together. No one knew how to explain it. They only knew it happened. And from those moments, stories were born. Stories that lived for centuries, shaping how people viewed death and the body. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine sitting in that room with the scent of wood smoke and herbs in the air. The fire crackles softly, casting golden light on the floor. Outside, a cold wind moves through the trees, but inside, everything feels still. It's the kind of stillness that belongs only to the past, calm, heavy, and eternal in feeling. For the medieval people, death was not a distant event. It happened in their homes, in their arms, in the small moments between daylight and dark. It wasn't surrounded by mystery or ceremony. It was simply part of life's rhythm, close, familiar, and accepted. Yet even then, the uncertainty lingered. Is this truly the end, or just another kind of sleep? The watchers believed in signs of final peace, a soft change in the body, a still calmness that felt different from rest. Some said the air itself would grow quieter, that the room would feel emptied of presence. These beliefs gave comfort, even when they weren't always certain. They helped families find closure in the face of silence. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. And as the fire fades, so does the tension of the story. We see the past not through fear, but through gentleness, through people who did their best with what little they knew. People who watched over one another in the dim glow of lamplight, hoping for one last breath. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. History often feels distant, yet in moments like this, it becomes tender, a reflection of our shared humanity, our wish to protect, to understand, to not let go too soon. And so they waited and watched, between life and death, between silence and hope. Now, as the night deepens, you can let this story fade softly. Imagine the watchers finally resting, their vigil complete. The house grows quiet, the fire dim, and outside, the world turns toward dawn. In their stillness, they found peace, and perhaps that's all any of us are searching for at the end of a long night. The fire is still warm, and the night has grown quieter. You've followed the path of the story this far, through fear, through stillness, through the edge of life and death. Now we enter the part of history that traveled by word of mouth, the stories that spread fear, not through fact, but through whispers that drifted from one village to another. As you listen, let your breath slow down. You're safe here, beside the imagined glow of firelight. Outside, the air is cool, and the world feels distant. All that matters now is the sound of the story unfolding slowly, like smoke curling through the air. This is where legend and reality begin to blur. In medieval times, people lived close to their fears. There were no news reports, no printed books, only voices, stories, and shared imagination. When one person spoke of a body that had moved after burial, it didn't take long for the tale to reach the next town. Each retelling added a little more, a sound, a shadow, a desperate cry from beneath the earth. And so the fear grew, not from proof, but from the power of words. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Some stories began from truth, a faint sound during burial, or a coffin disturbed by accident. But once they were told aloud, truth and invention became impossible to separate. People didn't need proof to believe. They only needed the feeling that it could happen to anyone. That possibility alone was enough to haunt their sleep. Imagine a villager sitting by the fire, repeating what they heard in the next valley. A man buried too soon, found days later with bloodied fingers and torn cloth. A woman said to have cried out just as the final earth was laid above her. Were these true? No one could be sure. But truth mattered less than the chill such stories left behind. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The flames flicker softly, like thoughts drifting in half-dream. You can almost hear those old voices, gentle, uncertain, filled with wonder and fear. They spoke of what they didn't understand, giving shape to their anxiety. In that way, fear became a kind of comfort, something shared among many. For every story of terror, there was also awe. People didn't only fear what they couldn't explain, they respected it. The idea that life could return after stillness fascinated them. It reminded them of how delicate the human body was, how easy it was to mistake silence for the end. So even the darkest tales carried traces of wonder. Take it slow. we're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. In each village, storytellers became keepers of these moments. Their voices carried across long winter nights, filling rooms with equal parts fear and curiosity. Some listeners leaned closer, others covered their ears, but all remembered the story and told it again when their turn came. The spreading of such tales was more than entertainment. It was a way of understanding the unknown, of warning others, of facing what could not be seen. And while the fear of being buried alive was terrible, it also revealed something tender, a deep desire to be seen, to be heard, even in silence. Perhaps that was the true heart of the story. Not horror, but the longing not to be forgotten. In some towns, people swore they heard muffled sounds at night near the graveyard. They said it could be the wind moving through hollow ground, or roots shifting beneath the soil. But fear has a way of shaping sound, turning the ordinary into something mysterious. And soon, even the rustle of grass became a whisper from beneath the earth. There were those who searched for evidence. When old graves were reopened for new burials, some claimed to see scratch marks inside the wooden lids. It's hard to know what truly happened. Time changes everything, even memory. But for those who believed, it was enough to confirm their deepest worry. A single story could travel for years, growing with every telling. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. These tales crossed borders and generations. They were told by travelers on lonely roads and by families during long winters. In their telling, people found a strange comfort, not joy, but connection. They feared together, and somehow that made them feel less alone. In many ways, fear became a form of storytelling itself. Each tale was a way of sharing lessons about caution, about awareness, about how fragile life could be. Even though the words were heavy, the meaning was simple: to stay careful, to watch closely, to cherish the living. And as those words passed through time, they softened into wisdom. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The fire glows low now, its warmth a steady heartbeat in the night. You can almost see the faces of those who once listened, their eyes reflecting the light, their minds drifting somewhere between belief and doubt. They didn't need proof to feel the weight of the story. They only needed silence. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. As centuries passed, these stories lost their sharp edges. They became echoes, soft, distant, and harmless. What once frightened generations now simply fascinates us. A reminder that fear, too, can fade into peace. Tonight, as the story rests, the air feels lighter. The tales of old have done their work. They've carried us through the darkness of imagination, through the whispers of the past, and into calm understanding. The world above and below are quiet now. All is still. You can let your eyes grow heavy. The fire crackles softly one last time. The storytellers of the past fade into the night, their voices gentle as the wind. No fear remains here, only the sound of calm breathing, and the memory of those who once told stories to keep each other company in the dark. The night has grown quiet again. The firelight moves softly across the walls, and the air feels still. We've heard how fear spread from voice to voice, how stories shaped the minds of those who lived long ago. Now, let's step into what came next. The ways people tried to prevent their greatest mistake, to make sure no one was ever buried alive. This isn't a story of panic, but of care. People didn't simply fear death, they respected it. They wanted to be certain, to protect their loved ones from a fate too painful to imagine. And so, from that fear came creativity, patience, and watchfulness, human efforts to guard the line between life and death. In the medieval world, precautions became part of ritual. Families began to wait longer before burial, sometimes days. They called this the watching period. It was a time of observation and care, where friends and neighbors took turns staying near the body, not to mourn endlessly, but to make sure, truly sure, that life had fully left. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The watchers sat beside quiet rooms, lamps flickering in the dark. They whispered softly, not wanting to disturb the silence. If a hand twitched or a chest rose slightly, they would see it. Their patience was not superstition, it was love, turned into vigilance. Some households placed mirrors close to the mouth, hoping to catch even the faintest sign of breath. Others used feathers, gently held beneath the nose, watching for the slightest movement of air. It was delicate work, uncertain, but deeply human, a small act of hope against the finality of loss. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Imagine the flicker of firelight reflecting on metal and glass. The quiet rhythm of someone's breathing as they keep watch through the long night. Outside, the world sleeps, but inside, time stands still. Every heartbeat, every silence feels sacred. It's not fear now, it's care turned into devotion. In some villages, bells were tied to the fingers of those who had passed. A thin ribbon connected to a small bell outside the coffin or near the bedside. If the body moved, even slightly, the bell would ring. It was a fragile thread between the world of the living and the unknown. And though it rarely sounded, its presence brought comfort. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Not every family could afford such things, but even the poorest found their own ways. Some waited until the warmth had completely faded from the body. Others kept a candle lit near the head of the bed for 3 nights. Light, they believed, helped guide the truth, whether to waking or to peace. Each practice came from the same feeling, that human life was precious and must not be mistaken for gone too soon. In every corner of the medieval world, these quiet precautions became an act of mercy. And while they may seem simple now, in their time they were remarkable proof that love could outshine fear, even in the darkest rooms. As years passed, these small acts of care became part of everyday custom. Communities began to share advice, writing down what to look for, how long to wait, what signs to trust. Each family added their own traditions, little habits passed from one generation to the next. They didn't think of it as science, only as caution born from love. And that love was enough to keep many mistakes from happening. In larger towns, some people began to design new tools. They created boxes with tiny air holes, cords tied to bells, or wooden lids that could be lifted from inside. Most of these were simple ideas, never tested, but they showed a growing understanding that even fear could lead to invention when guided by care. In the quiet of those times, creativity was survival. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The bell became a symbol, a sound of hope, a promise of safety. Many believed that even if it never rang, it gave peace to the living. It reminded them that they had done everything possible, that nothing had been left to chance. And so the bell stayed, quietly guarding the silence. Some families placed food or water near the resting place, just in case someone woke in confusion. Others spoke gentle words during burial, not as ritual, but as kindness. a way of saying, "You're safe now, wherever you are." It was a soft farewell, careful and full of compassion. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The world around the story feels older now, slower, more peaceful. You can picture the watchers sitting close together, sharing stories to stay awake through the long night. They weren't afraid anymore. They were calm, patient, waiting not for fear, but for certainty. In the distance, a rooster might call, and the first hint of morning would touch the horizon. That was when the watchers finally rested. They knew they had done what they could. They had watched with love and guarded the line between life and death. The fear didn't vanish, but it softened into understanding. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. For centuries, these careful habits continued, until medicine and knowledge made them unnecessary. But the memory of them remains, not as superstition, but as a quiet chapter of human tenderness. Now, as the night grows deeper, imagine the bell resting still, untouched, unmoving, its metal cool in the firelight. No sound, no panic, only peace. It has done its duty, and the watchers can finally sleep. Their long night has ended, and their fear has turned into calm. And as we sit by the same quiet fire, centuries later, we can feel what they must have felt, the relief of understanding, the comfort of patience, and the peace that comes when fear fades into love. The fire hums softly, the world slows down, and the story settles like ash, gentle and still. The night lingers, but the fire still burns softly. Its glow touches the edges of the old wooden walls, and for a moment it feels as though time has stopped. The stories we've heard of fear, of caution, of quiet waiting, all lead us here. To those who tried to bring certainty where there was none, the healers and observers of the medieval world, they were not scientists as we know them today, but men and women who carried patience, intuition, and long experience. They watched over the sick, and they watched over the dying. Their hands, though simple, held generations of knowledge. They worked not with tools of metal, but with eyes that noticed the smallest signs of life. Healers in medieval times were often called when death seemed near. They were the final hope, not always to save, but to confirm. They checked the pulse by touch, held a mirror to the mouth, or placed an ear near the heart, listening for what others could not hear. Sometimes their quiet certainty gave families peace. Sometimes it gave them time. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. These healers were not always right, but they cared deeply. They understood that a mistake could mean heartbreak, so they took their time, sometimes sitting for hours beside a still body. Theirs was not a job of speed, but of patience. Some used gentle warmth to test for life, placing their hands on the chest or wrist, feeling for movement under the skin. Others believed in observing the color of the lips or the softness of the eyes under dim light. Each small gesture carried hope, an effort to bridge the thin line between stillness and breath. In small villages, these observers became trusted guides. When someone was thought to have passed, a healer's word meant everything. They were called quietly, sometimes at night, to make the final confirmation. And though their knowledge was limited, their calm presence made families feel less afraid of what they couldn't understand. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. In that darkness, a single lamp burns the healer's light. It flickers, reflecting on calm faces gathered nearby. They wait for a nod, a word, a sign. Sometimes the verdict came softly, "They are at peace," and other times it came as relief, "They are still here." The difference between those two sentences changed everything. It turned tears into laughter, or silence into gratitude. And so, the work of these observers became more than just duty. It became a quiet act of mercy, a way to hold back despair with patience and care. Take it slow, we're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. In every village, their presence reminded people that death was not always certain, and that sometimes life could still whisper beneath the quiet. Even when they failed, their effort mattered, because, in trying to save, they reminded others how precious life truly was. As the years went by, the role of the healer became part of every community's rhythm. They were called not only when someone was sick, but also in moments of uncertainty. If there was even the faintest question of life or death, people waited for their quiet judgment. Their word was trusted more than rumor, more than fear. In their calmness, people found comfort. Many healers learned through years of watching. They studied patterns, the way breath faded, the way warmth lingered in the skin, how certain illnesses slowed the heart to almost nothing. They had no books, only memory, and that memory was precious. It was their way of protecting others from mistakes. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine a small house at the edge of a medieval village. A family gathered in silence while a healer listens for a heartbeat. The room smells faintly of herbs and smoke. No one speaks, they only wait, and in that waiting, they show their deepest respect for life itself. Sometimes, a healer would ask to wait longer before burial. They knew that stillness could deceive. Many listened to their advice, grateful for the care it represented. And even when their waiting changed nothing, families remembered the patience, the kindness of someone who stayed. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The healers worked not for recognition, but out of quiet responsibility. In the uncertainty of their world, they brought a sense of peace. Even when death was certain, their presence softened its arrival. They helped people say goodbye without fear. In time, observers learned to share what they had seen. They spoke to others about the signs, to notice, teaching neighbors to wait, to watch, to trust their senses. Their knowledge spread quietly, without writing, but it shaped entire generations who learned that rushing brought sorrow. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. This slow way of living, this habit of patience, became a kind of wisdom. It taught people that life moves gently, that endings come in silence, and that even silence deserves time to be understood. It was not fear that guided them anymore, but compassion. As dawn neared, healers often stayed until the first light touched the window. It was their way of honoring the transition, the moment when night handed the world back to the sun. They rose quietly, tired but peaceful, knowing they had served in the space between life and death. Now the fire beside you glows faintly, and the story settles like ash at the edge of the flame. The watchers, the healers, and the families all fade into rest. Their work was simple, but it was sacred in its intent, to guard life until its final breath, and to do so with gentleness. So, as you rest now, remember their patience. They lived slowly, carefully, and kindly, a lesson that still holds meaning in every quiet night. The fire hums softly, the air is calm, and somewhere in the distance, the healers of the past finally sleep. The fire has burned low now. Its glow is soft, like the heartbeat of a story that refuses to fade. Outside, the air is cool, and the night seems endless. We've spoken of fear, of care, of the people who watched, through sleepless hours. But there was another mystery that shaped their fear, the strange and silent illnesses that made the living seem dead. Some called it the sleeping sickness, others gave it no name at all, only a whisper of confusion and awe. It was an illness that slowed the body so deeply it seemed as if life itself had paused. To the eyes of medieval people, it was as if someone had drifted into another world. The people of that time didn't understand what caused such deep sleep. They only saw the signs, the still body, the slow breath, the faint pulse. Sometimes a person could remain motionless for hours, even days. And when they awoke, it was as if life had been borrowed back from the edge of silence. It felt miraculous, yet terrifying. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine sitting in a small wooden room, watching someone you love lying perfectly still, their skin pale, their breath almost invisible. You don't know if this is sleep or death, only that the air feels heavy with waiting. In those moments, families called for healers or watchers, hoping to find signs of life hidden in the stillness. They would touch the hand, check the warmth, and sometimes whisper softly, believing that a familiar voice might bring the spirit back. And sometimes, miraculously, it did. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. This strange condition blurred the line between rest and finality. It wasn't magic or mystery, just the body protecting itself in ways no one yet understood. Illness, exhaustion, or fever could drive someone so deep into unconsciousness that even the most careful observer could be fooled. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Some believed the body could fall into the great sleep after illness, a kind of hibernation of the soul. But to those who watched, it was impossible to tell when it might end. So they waited, hour after hour, whispering prayers for a breath, a sign, a movement. To them, each recovery was a small miracle, a reminder that silence was not always the end, and that life could return, even after all hope seemed lost. They didn't understand why it happened, but they learned to be patient with the mystery, to trust that time itself would reveal the truth. In some records from old villages, there are notes of people waking after being thought gone. They would rise weakly, confused, unable to speak at first. Families wept and held them close, both relieved and afraid. No one knew why they had returned, only that it felt like witnessing life being breathed back into the world. And for days afterward, the household moved quietly, as if afraid to disturb the miracle. Healers tried to understand these moments. They observed how fevers sometimes faded into deep, unmoving sleep. They noticed that people weakened by hunger or sickness could appear lifeless for long hours. It was not magic, but nature, the body slowing down to survive. Still, to those watching, it felt like standing between two worlds. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine the hush inside a small stone cottage. A single candle flickers. A loved one lies still. Then, a faint sigh, the slow return of breath. The sound fills the room like sunlight breaking through fog. It is quiet, but it is everything. The stories of such awakenings spread quickly. People told them in hushed tones beside fireplaces, each tale carrying both wonder and warning. They spoke of being careful, of waiting longer, of trusting warmth over fear. The lesson was clear: never rush what time alone can decide. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Outside, the wind has stilled, and the night is thick with peace. In the flickering light, a family sits together, the one silent sleeper now resting peacefully. truly alive. They say nothing. They simply listen to the sound of breathing, and in that sound, they find comfort beyond words. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. For generations, these quiet recoveries shaped the way people viewed life and death. They learned to see stillness not as final, but as a space between a pause in the rhythm of existence. It taught them patience, humility, and the value of watchful care. Over time, the fear of being buried alive became less about terror and more about vigilance. It turned into a tradition of careful waiting, a quiet promise that no one would be forgotten too soon. Even today, those old lessons remain in the corners of history, gentle reminders that life often hides in silence. Now, as the night deepens and the fire softens to embers, you can feel the same calm that they once felt, a peace that comes from waiting, from trusting time, from knowing that rest is not always the end, but sometimes only the beginning of renewal. Let the quiet settle around you. The story slows, the breath evens, and the world outside fades away. Sleep, like those long ago recoveries, will come in its own time, not rushed, not forced, but natural, patient, and kind. The fire has burned down to soft embers now. The sound is gentle, almost like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. We've followed the fears and hopes of those who lived long ago, their patience, their care, their faith in waiting. But as stories of mistaken death continued, new ideas began to take shape. Ideas carved not in words, but in wood and iron. The inventions known as the coffins of caution. Now, let's return to the story. As the centuries turned, whispers of people waking in their graves began to move from rumor into invention. People wanted protection, a final assurance that if life still lingered, it would not be sealed away beneath the earth. And so, carpenters, craftsmen, and thinkers began to create new kinds of coffins. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. These were not grand or complex designs at first, just small openings carved into the wood for air. A rope attached to the hand, connected to a bell above the ground. The idea was simple. If the sleeper moved, the bell would ring softly in the night. Imagine walking through a quiet cemetery in the 1700s, the breeze carrying the faint sound of a bell, a reminder that care continued even in death. It wasn't fear that made them build these things, it was love, a refusal to let go too soon, and a wish to be heard if one last breath remained. In some regions, the designs became elaborate. Pipes led from the coffin to the surface, allowing air and sometimes even the faintest voice to travel through. Families could check the resting place and know that if silence remained, peace had truly arrived. It was a strange comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Each invention reflected the deep compassion of the living. Even in an age without science, people used their creativity to protect those they loved from fear. They turned their anxiety into action, and in doing so, transformed fear into peace. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The safety coffin became a symbol of care, a final act of love from one generation to the next. Some saw it as unnecessary, others as hope, but for those who believed, it brought rest to the heart long before the body ever touched the ground. These quiet devices were rarely used, but their existence meant something deeper. They showed that human beings would go to great lengths to preserve life, even when life seemed gone, to ensure that silence was never mistaken for the end. And in that effort, they found peace in their uncertainty. In time, these careful inventions became part of quiet conversations. Villagers spoke of them not with fear, but with curiosity. Some believed that every person deserved the chance to be heard, even after the world believed them gone. It wasn't about escaping death, but about kindness, a way of saying, "We will not forget you too soon." Craftsmen began to record their ideas in sketches and notes. There were drawings of lids that opened from within, or strings tied to small flags that could rise from the ground. Others imagined air tubes that reached the surface, so that anyone who might awaken could breathe freely. The ideas were simple, but they carried deep hope. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Many of these devices were never used, but their existence told a quiet truth about humanity. Even surrounded by uncertainty, people found comfort in preparation, in believing they had done enough. That belief helped them sleep at night and mourn with peace. In larger towns, inventors began to share their creations. Some offered security burials for families who could afford them, advertising designs that promised safety and certainty. It sounds strange now, yet in their time, these ideas were born from genuine love and fear intertwined. The wish to protect, even beyond the final breath. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Somewhere in that stillness, the faint image of a bell lingers, not ringing, not moving, only resting above the earth. It became a symbol of care, a reminder that even in death, people are never truly abandoned by those who love them. And that memory outlasted the inventions themselves. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. As the years passed, science improved, and such precautions faded. But the spirit behind them remained, a gentle echo through history, reminding us of how deeply humans value life. Every small sound, every breath, became sacred to those who once waited in silence. The fire beside you flickers faintly, its glow soft and familiar. Imagine those who once sat by their own fires centuries ago, sharing these same stories in hushed voices. They didn't speak of horror, only of care, and of the hope that love would always be heard, even in silence. And now, as the story slows, you can feel that same quiet understanding they once felt, that peace doesn't come from certainty, but from compassion, from watching, from waiting without fear. The coffins of caution may have faded from memory, but their meaning remains. Love that listens, even through the quiet earth. The night deepens, the fire glows softly against the dark, and all that's left is calm, a stillness so complete that it feels almost like sleep itself. Let it hold you for a while. You're safe here, and the story will keep watch as you rest. The firelight glows quietly once more. Its warmth spreads slowly across the room, as though it remembers every story that came before. The fear, the care, the inventions, all of it shaped something deeper. A culture not of panic, but of observation and respect. This was how people of the past learned to face death, not as something to fight against, but something to understand gently. In many medieval towns, the act of watching the dead became a custom of love. It wasn't about suspicion or fear anymore. Families gathered, lamps flickering, keeping company with the one who had passed away, of saying, "We are with you, even now." They believed that presence itself was a kind of respect. Take it slow, we're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Those long nights of watching were quiet. No one hurried, no one spoke loudly. There was time for reflection, for gentle tears, and for gratitude that life had been lived at all. In silence, they found connection, not just with the departed, but with one another. Over time, this became a shared ritual. Villagers took turns sitting in the room through the night. They brought warm cloths, candles, and soft voices. Sometimes, someone would hum an old tune, not to wake the dead, but to comfort the living. The room would fill with warmth, and even in sorrow, there was peace. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Imagine the soft glow of candlelight reflecting off gentle faces, tired, calm, but filled with quiet dignity. Each watcher had their own way of showing care. Some offered stories, others silent prayer, and some simply watched the light tremble, feeling the passage of time with reverence. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. This culture of observation wasn't built on superstition, but on patience, on giving time the space it deserved. It was a lesson learned through fear, refined through compassion. A reminder that to watch is to love, and to wait is to understand the rhythm of life itself. In that waiting, people discovered serenity. They saw that stillness wasn't something to fear, but something to honor. They didn't speak of endings, only of transitions, and so death became not a moment, but a gentle slowing of time, watched over by those who cared too much to look away. As the centuries passed, the custom of watching remained. Even as knowledge grew and medicine improved, people still chose to keep vigil, not from fear, but from the quiet dignity of care. It was their way of saying that life, even in its final stillness, deserved company. In every village, the watchers became symbols of trust. Neighbors knew that when a death occurred, someone would stay awake. Someone would keep the lamp burning so that the darkness never felt complete. It was not just about guarding the body, but about honoring the life that had filled it. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. You can almost see them now, sitting near the dim glow, hands resting on their knees, eyes soft and unfocused. The room quiet except for the faint sound of breathing, the rhythm of wood crackling in the fire. They weren't thinking of fear, only of presence. Sometimes the watchers spoke softly to the one who had gone, thanking them for kindness, for laughter, for the ordinary days that now seemed extraordinary. Other times, they said nothing at all. Words weren't always needed. Silence itself became a language of love. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Beyond the walls of those old homes, the world slept unaware of the tenderness happening inside. To the watchers, the hours felt long, but they were filled with meaning. It was in these moments that a culture of respect was quietly born. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. When morning finally arrived, the watchers would open the windows to let the light in. It marked not just the end of the vigil, but the beginning of peace, a calm acceptance that life had moved into memory. These quiet practices taught generations how to live gently. They reminded people that attention is a gift, that care does not end when a breath stops, and that patience can ease the sharpness of loss. In watching, they found meaning. In waiting, they found peace. Even now, centuries later, the memory of those long nights lingers in stories and customs. We may not keep vigil the same way, but the lesson remains: to move slowly, to listen deeply, and to treat every passing moment as something sacred. So as the fire glows low beside you, and the world outside grows still, you can rest in that same quiet tradition. You are safe, you are seen, and somewhere in time, the watchers of the past are still keeping company beside their flickering lights. Fear, in the medieval world, was not always loud. It was quiet, hidden beneath the rhythm of daily life. People lived close to uncertainty, and that uncertainty shaped the way they thought about death. To be buried alive was not just a horror story. It was the ultimate loss of control, the idea of being unseen, unheard, and forgotten while still alive. This fear reached deeper than the grave itself. It was a reflection of how fragile human understanding once was. Without clear signs, without knowledge, people learned to live with doubt. They didn't fear death as much as they feared misunderstanding it, the thought that one might still have breath, yet no one would notice. It was not fear of the end, but of being trapped between life and silence. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Imagine lying still in the darkness, unable to move or speak, waiting for someone to see you. Even imagining it now brings a faint unease, that quiet anxiety that lives deep in the mind. In the medieval age, such thoughts came easily. The world was smaller, nights were longer, and the line between life and death was softer than it is today. For many, the fear was not about the body at all, but about the soul, not in a religious sense, but in a deeply human one. They wanted to be remembered, to be acknowledged, to know that their existence had weight. Being buried alive symbolized the opposite of that, to vanish without anyone realizing you were still here. It was the fear of being invisible. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Psychologically, fear like this often grows in silence. In a time without answers, imagination fills the gaps. Each story of mistaken death became more than a warning. It became a mirror for human vulnerability. People began to project their own doubts into these tales. What if it were me? What if I slept too deeply and the world moved on without me? The fear of burial alive also carried a strange paradox. It made people more cautious, but also more compassionate. In worrying that someone might be buried too soon, they developed habits of patience, care, and close observation. What began as fear slowly turned into empathy, a collective understanding that life deserved time, even in stillness. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. In that dark, the fear that once haunted people no longer feels like terror. It feels like reflection. It reminds us how deeply humans long to be seen, to be known, and to be certain that their presence matters. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. In every whispered tale of someone waking beneath the ground, there was an echo of this longing. The fear said, "Don't forget me. Don't close the world before I'm truly gone." It wasn't a cry of horror, but of connection, a plea for awareness in a time when silence often spoke louder than life itself. Through that fear, people found meaning. They learned that care could defeat uncertainty, and that attention was a form of love. The mind, even when afraid, still seeks gentleness, still seeks a reason to believe that someone will notice. Someone will stay. Someone will listen for breath in the quiet. In every century, fear takes the shape of its time. For medieval people, it was the earth and the grave. For us, it may be something unseen, like silence or distance. Yet beneath it all, the feeling is the same, the longing to be noticed, to be valued, to not disappear without a trace. Their stories remind us that fear is not always weakness. Sometimes it is a sign of how deeply we care about being alive. When people told these stories, they weren't trying to frighten others. They were trying to make sense of uncertainty. They turned their worry into words, and in doing so, gave fear a form that could be shared and softened. Telling these tales made the darkness less lonely. Even the act of speaking fear aloud became a way of quieting it. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. There's something gentle about the way fear works in the quiet mind. It begins as unease, then softens into awareness. Those who feared being buried alive were really learning how to pay attention to the pulse, to the breath, to every fragile sign that life still remained. Their fear became the foundation for patience, and their patience became an act of mercy. The mind seeks meaning in everything. For the people of that time, meaning came from observation, from seeing what others might miss. That was how they brought peace to themselves, by learning that awareness could protect life. It's strange to think that fear could lead to compassion, but that's what it did. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. The fire burns low, its light gentle against the cold air. You can almost feel the stillness they must have known, the quiet hours before dawn, when all that remained was thought and breath. In those moments, fear no longer felt like panic. It became contemplation. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. When they spoke of death, it wasn't to chase fear away, but to understand it. They didn't want to escape it. They wanted to meet it with open eyes, to make sure they understood the difference between silence and finality. That understanding gave them peace. It allowed them to live with awareness, not denial. In their quiet way, medieval people practiced mindfulness long before the word existed. They paid attention to the smallest things, a flicker of breath, a shift of light, a sound in the dark. Their lives were filled with waiting, but that waiting taught them calmness. It shaped a world where even fear could be faced gently. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. And so, the psychology of this fear was not about death at all. It was about connection. The wish to remain part of the living world for as long as possible. The hope that someone would notice, that care would outlast the moment of silence. In that wish, they left behind something precious. The understanding that to see, to listen, and to wait is the purest form of love. Now the fire has grown quiet, its glow dim and steady. The stories, the fears, the lessons, they've all settled into peace. What was once anxiety has turned into wisdom, and what was once dread has become rest. The night breathes softly, the world is still, and in that stillness there is no fear left, only calm, patient awareness, waiting for morning. The fire has grown faint, its light resting on the edges of ash. The room is warm, silent, and still. Outside, the wind moves softly through unseen trees. The story has carried us through fear, through waiting, through the quiet care of people who once lived centuries ago. Now, we come to the final part, a reflection on rest, then and now. For those who lived in the medieval world, rest and death were not so different. Both were seen as states of stillness, moments when the body surrendered to peace. Sleep was a small rehearsal for eternity, not frightening, just natural. In sleep, the world slowed down. In death, it stopped completely. Yet to them, both carried a kind of calm. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Over time, as knowledge grew and fear faded, people began to see death less as something to fear and more as a gentle transition. The mistakes that once haunted them, those stories of premature burial, became lessons in patience, compassion, and observation. The fear had taught them how to value the smallest signs of life. It had taught them how to care. In our world today, those lessons still whisper quietly beneath the noise of modern life. We no longer wait beside oil lamps or tie bells to fingers, but the longing remains the same: to be seen, to be understood, to be given time. In every age, rest is a reminder that stillness has meaning, that silence, too, can speak. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The medieval people watched through long nights because they believed attention could guard life. We too watch in our own way over loved ones, over our thoughts, over the quiet corners of our days. Though the world has changed, the heart has not. It still seeks peace, understanding, and the comfort of being known. Imagine sitting beside a fire like this, hundreds of years ago. The same soft sound, the same warm air, the same rhythm of breath. Nothing has truly changed in that simple moment, just people, waiting, listening, resting. Time folds in on itself, and the distance between centuries disappears. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Somewhere, dawn waits beyond the horizon, unseen but certain. That is what rest truly is, not an ending, but a pause before light returns. The people of the past may not have understood every mystery of life and death, but they understood that rest was part of the rhythm of existence. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Even now, the same truth holds. To rest is not to give up, but to trust that the world will continue while you are still. The watchers of old stayed awake so that others could sleep, and tonight this story keeps watch for you. It hums softly through time, guarding the edge of your dreams, as the fire hums in its final glow. As the centuries turned, rest became something more than a physical need. It became a reflection of trust, the belief that the world could be still for a moment, and that life would continue when you woke. Medieval people didn't have the science we have now, but they understood the importance of surrendering to stillness. In that surrender, they found peace. Even the fear that once haunted them softened into wisdom. The thought of being buried alive became less about terror and more about presence, a reminder to slow down, to notice life while it's still here. They learned, in their quiet way, that awareness is the most powerful comfort of all. To see, to wait, to breathe, these were their final acts of care. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. The room is quiet now. The air feels heavy with calm. The fire burns low, painting soft shadows across the walls. You can almost hear the slow rhythm of your own breathing blending with the sound of imagined crackling wood. This is what rest has always been, a return to peace, a gentle reminder that time will hold you while you drift. In that stillness, you are no different from those who came before: the watchers, the healers, the quiet observers. They waited beside the fire for signs of life. You wait beside this story for sleep to find you. Both moments carry the same tenderness, the wish to be safe, the comfort of knowing that someone or something is keeping watch. The sky above the ruins is still dark, but it's safe. Outside, dawn has not yet arrived, but you can feel it waiting beyond the horizon, patient, steady, certain. The fire hums faintly in the last of its warmth. Every story, like every night, must eventually rest, and this one has come gently to its end. Take it slow. We're still here. The fire is still burning. Stay calm. Let your thoughts fade like smoke rising from the embers. The world around you can quiet now. There's nothing left to hold on to. Only peace, only warmth, only stillness. If your eyes close, let them. The story will wait for you, safely, in the space between memory and sleep. The people of the past once feared being forgotten, but tonight their voices have been heard again, softly, kindly, without fear. Through this story, their world touches ours for a moment, like a hand meeting another across time, and in that meeting, both find peace. Take one last breath. The night is calm. The fire has turned to quiet glow. There is nothing more to think about, only the comfort of knowing that you've traveled through history and returned with a slower heartbeat, a gentler mind, and a little more peace. If you've enjoyed this quiet journey through history, I invite you to subscribe and return next time. There's always another forgotten story waiting for you. Our next calm exploration will drift into another world entirely, a place of lace curtains, candlelight, and whispered goodbyes. The next story is titled, What Was Death Like in the Victorian Home? Until then, rest well, let the quiet take you, and may your sleep tonight be deep, peaceful, and kind.